Everyone, we're gonna start our session, the last session before field trips this afternoon. Welcome to Community-Based Conservation Session 7B. We're gonna start our session with a talk from Bruce Hoffman. Bruce works for the Amazon Conservation Team. He is an ethnobotanist and tropical botanist with years of experience working in the Guinea Shield region of South America with indigenous and maroon communities in biocultural conservation and indigenous knowledge. He's also an author. He wrote the Lianas of the Guiana's Guide to Woody Climbers. Bruce's talk is called Biocultural Restoration, Decolonizing a Kogui, and I might have said that incorrectly, I'm sorry if I did, sacred site in Northeast Colombia.
Hey. Thank you everyone for coming. Maybe a few more people will filter in. Okay, so I'm going to introduce you to a very interesting project. It is with the Kogui people in Northeast Colombia. And I upfront want to thank my colleagues in ACT Colombia, because they really have been doing this work with decolonization and biocultural restoration for many more years than I have. And really some of the mamas, the elders, or the ACT Colombia staff would be nice if they could be here. So that's just something to be aware of. It's not moving. Okay. Okay, so the sequence of the talk today, it'll be, I'll go talk a little bit about the people in the place, the indigenous landscape that they're in, that they see, the co-management strategies that ACT Colombia and the Kogui people and the government are using, some results, and talk about our monitoring and what's coming next. So this is a map of where ACT, Amazon Conservation Team, the organization I work for, has projects. And I want to draw your attention to the little heart up there in the corner, and that is the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta mountains. And the Kogui see it as the heart of the world. So that was, we're going to go in and look a little closer. It's even kind of heart-shaped here. So this is a close-up of Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta. Has anyone been here? You guys? Okay. Well, this is the tallest, highest coastal mountain in the world at close to 6,000 meters. And it is, incredibly biodiverse and many life zones, and has many big watershed systems. Just an amazing place. And I want to draw your attention to these colors. These are indigenous reserves. So there are 4 different indigenous groups. Maybe there's subgroups, but there's 4 different major indigenous groups and approximately 30,000 people living in these mountains. And I want to draw your attention to this line, La Línea Negra, which is a spiritual zone circling the mountains, and it's with 348 sacred spots recognized by the indigenous people. So kind of like beads on a necklace surrounding the entire mountain at the lower elevations. And there's a name at the top there, Yaba Tani Washkaka. I'm probably going to just start saying Yaba so I don't have to keep saying Tani Washkaka incorrectly. Okay, so the Kogui live primarily at these high elevations. I'm really used to looking up. And that is a kind of, I think, decolonization through elevation, avoiding the lowlands where the colonization was happening. So that is their traditional territory, but also all the way down to the ocean was their traditional territory. But in these days, they're living mostly primarily high up in the mountains in these little villages. And they are a very traditional people. Here's a couple. They have, they're guided by their elders, which are called mamas. And I hope this video works. While the Kogui recognize many sacred sites on the black line, this is the most important one down in the lower elevations. This is the Botany Washkaka on the Caribbean coast, 218 hectares. And for the Kogui, it's the origin of their world. It's one of their most important sites in this Linea Negra. They go here in the past. They would pray, do prayers and offerings in this area and also for the mountains. It would all be linked, so everything is connected, like the conference here. Down also at the site, Haba, they would go and they'd collect shells for ritual purposes and also for their coca. They have these little gourds and they have dried coca leaves and they put the shells with it for the cow. So it's several sources. I like how their dog is also white, matching their clothes. Okay, this is a representation of the mountains from the highest point, Gana Windua, down to Haba. So on the bottom, you can see that's complicated. Here's Haba, and here is the watershed, right, going up, and Paramo already here. And then here's some high elevation. They're called eswamas in the Kogui language, and they are lagoons, high elevation lagoons. So they are very important for the Kogui. This is where they do a lot of their spiritual work and where they consult, and they send prayers down to this area from this particular watershed. And they also believe you have to send prayers back up from down there to keep the world in balance, basically. And so I thought this could also be a whole new study, if anyone's interested, called hydrology cosmology. Unfortunately, the Haba ecosystem was severely degraded. It was in private hands, and it was basically a garbage dump, and cows and everything you can imagine not respected, and it was difficult for them to get in. And so that's part of why Amazon Conservation Team started to work with them to try to find a solution to that. How am I on time? Okay. So I'm going to just go through some of the strategies with ACT and working with the government and with the people, the indigenous people and various communities. The first thing, the most important thing, was the land tenure, finding a way for land tenure. And that was amazingly in Colombia, not as hard as you would think. So the government, the Ministry of Culture, declared this area of national cultural interest. The Colombian president at that time, 2018, made a decree for it to be, for the Linea Negra to be respected. And then the best thing probably is the Colombia Land Agency formalized this expansion of Haba into a bigger, much bigger area. So these things came together in an amazing way, and also with funding. And these are some of the areas in Haba that were privately owned, that were bought in different years, slowly put together until the whole area was nicely unified. And we also did vegetation mapping. This is lowland rainforest, lowland dry tropical forest. And also it's a wetland. It's a very important wetland. So there's kind of a combination of environments there. And even down to species, the distribution of species. I mean, this zone has been really studied intensely and as a collaborative project. And the second part was a spiritual work, the offerings, the reciprocity that's we've heard spoken about at this meeting a lot, and with plants and with nature. So the mamas would talk to the Kalashe and Kalabia, the father and mother of native trees, to ensure that native trees would survive in this area. And they said, because we know these trees have parents that are around because they're native, we don't want any non-natives coming here because they don't have parents that are here that we can talk to. Yeah. And there was also buildings were built in their traditional style where they could do their rituals down by the ocean. So this is part of the whole site, very important part, cultural part. And here's some mapping of significant places of significance in Haba. And of course, too much to talk about, but so many places are important to them, and almost everything has its, has some significance and is seen as almost a being, right? And so these little lagoons along the coast, they have names. And here's some of the names. So these are showing, these gray patches are the lagoons. And then they have names like, they're called Madre Viejas. And this one is of the tools, of the food, of the wild fruits. So they have these lagoon spirit kind of places that are looking after different things. And many, many sites have uses and intentions. Now, of course, there's also physical work, removing all that garbage, putting up fences to keep these livestock out, planting native trees. But really the Kogui were focused on giving the land time to recover and letting natural regeneration come. So it wasn't a gigantic planting project. It was just keeping it safe and letting it come back on its own. And there's also a management plan, very extensive, very Colombian, like so hierarchical and gigantic, but it seems it's really, really good, high quality. Here's some of the components of the management plan: conservation of nature, protecting sacred sites, governance, self-governance, empowerment, and then monitoring. And here is the administrative setup. So the yellow is Kogui, and the green is ACT components, people, the director of Colombia, Carolina Gill, and then the scientists with ProCat doing trapping and camera trapping and monitoring. Okay, and there's also a portal for management and monitoring and management. So it's an interactive monitoring dashboard that was created by some of our people. And then we're looking at birds, animals, water levels, threats, and doing this with the people. So this is a Colombian guy, Cristobal, and Ebawi, a Kogui, and they're working together. And they had like three teams from outsiders and Kogui. And they were looking for 44 indicator species, and they found 42 of them. There were a lot of good results with the bird surveys. Here's a water level monitoring. Here's an example of what the dashboard looks like when you put all the data in. This is about 1 year of data. And then here's a corner of the site in 2012. And then 2021. So there's quite an improvement, I think. There was burning on the site. There were other problems, but I still, well, here's the next slide. Okay. Restoration success. Yeah, I think overall, it's kind of a it's a project, it's in progress, but there was quite a bit of success in connectivity, in mangroves coming in, and no erosion on the coast. That was stopped completely. There was hydrology started to get more normal. And so these lagoons were filling up and on a regular basis. But then we had El Nino, things got screwed up for a while. There's a lot of back and forth. Shrimp and lobster populations. The fishermen are coming to the waterfront in front of this place and fishing because there's so much life there with shrimp and lobsters compared to outside. So that's a great sign. Have to worry about the usual, drug cartels and politics and things like that. Okay, going forward, we want to protect other sacred sites on the Linea Negra. So that's definitely a focus. There are other communities and other places. It's not just this one spot. Protect entire watersheds. So right now we're looking at working with the government to buy more land and move up the watershed. So to actually connect the mountains and the ocean with land tenure, or with people that are willing to, cooperate and be more sustainable. Support exchanges and collaboration. So we have these different groups, the Arawakos and the Kogui, and they're working together more and more. So that's empowering. And then the way that we're training them to do their own monitoring mapping, that's the idea. And this, I didn't think I'd have time for this slide, but this is, it says stop. I'm almost on the last slide. This is a center for ancestral knowledge and scientific knowledge, indigenous knowledge. And some of these buildings are already there at that site at the Haba. So this is, most of this is the structures are already there, and there's programs for that. So that's exciting. So I believe this project serves as a successful example of this synergy and respect between indigenous people and nonprofits, scientists and governments. And I think it's a really good model, to use. If we can do this kind of integration, I think it really doesn't work to not bring in the government at all and just ambush them with some plan, unless it becomes impossible. And still a work in progress, and I hope it can be a model for others. And again, thanks to the Colombia team that really did so much of this work, and it wouldn't exist like this without them and the Kogui. And there's Mark Plotkin with one of the main mamas that we work with. Thank you.
I think we have time for maybe one or two questions.
I wanted to ask you, what's the guideline that they have for hunting and for monitoring game? You said they have 100 traps, but I wonder if there's any sort of like strong program that keeps track of the
Well, you mean beyond the camera traps? I don't know what they do beyond the camera traps. I mean, they are, they're not hunting extensively on that particular plot. I think they go elsewhere and hunt. And definitely people are not allowed to come in and hunt on the land. They can fish offshore, but they're not allowed to just go in past the fences.
Sorry, Robbie, no.
Thank you so much for that presentation. In the Himalayas, it seems like people who live on these big elevational gradients often make use of it through moving up and down the elevational gradient based on season or resources, things like that. But there are, as barriers exist in other places where people try to move around, there are often barriers in the Himalayas, people actually doing that vertical transhumance. Are there barriers in your area too, to these people effectively using their elevational gradient, or are they able to do that?
I mean, the issue for them is that so much land is owned by private holders. And some of those people are very aggressive and don't like indigenous people, so that's the main issue. They have the way up in the mountains, they have their places, nobody can argue, they have these big reserves. I think that and the drugs, is a real danger. And so they've been dealing with that, for decades, that they will just be randomly killed, for going through certain areas. So that's what we're trying to do with that watershed map I was showing you, to slowly buy out people and move up. Yeah, good question. Yeah.
I'm frankly quite amazed at this beautiful project. As you know, the ancestors of today's Kogui, the Tairona people lived all along the coast. And just like a few decades ago, I think a lot of people thought the coast was lost. if La Línea Negra has got some sort of governmental recognition, in particular sacred sites along it have been given some sort of governmental recognition, what do you think are the prospects for protection for those other sacred sites along the coast? Because that's been a really difficult battle over the years. What are the prospects going forward of extending this to other sacred sites along La Línea Negra?
In some places, I think are hopeless, you know, and other ones there, I mean, you have to work where you have the best chance, right? And I mean, some places are completely, it's just like a totally obliterated, you know, like a big, a shipping port, something like that. So yeah, there is some legal now protection or respect, you know, but it also changes with the government. If you have it, right now it's a friendly government. So I think now we need to be moving on some of the places.
I just find this word